Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Susie Flug-Silva and I am the director of the EYJ and Phyllis and Segal Citizen Leadership Program. We're so happy that you're joining us for our 2022 Segal Fellows in Action panel. I'll share a little bit more about our panel, the program, and our thanks in a minute, but first we're thrilled to have words of opening welcome from Heller's interim dean, Maria Madison. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Susie. It's exciting to be here with you all and the next cohort of Segal Fellows. I have to say, I've watched this program since my first day at Heller when Susie demonstrated the values that the Segal program promotes that are identical to the Heller mission and values as well, which is inclusion and belonging. And from that first week, Susie and Segal invited me in. And I went, was it DC or where were, yeah, DC for a wonderful workshop where we dug deep into the issues of equity, inclusion, and diversity within the civil responsibility framework. And so I'm excited to be back here now, 5 years, going on my 6th year as the interim dean, just continuing that relationship. In particular, what's exciting are the voices of all of the current and past Segal Fellows. I just had lunch with most of you and just so inspiring. There's never enough time. Everyone who is working in Segal isn't just doing the work when they're out on their assignments, but you embody and you embrace that vigorous commitment to change and social justice. And that's the Heller motto as well. I know we debate the motto, knowledge advancing social justice, but you also helped me to promote the expanded motto, which is knowledge, empathy, and nothing about us without us motto towards social justice. We also have a series of guiding principles. I think honestly that I found out that our own past provost president dean Lisa Lynch might have helped to create these guiding principles, which is pretty exciting. But I'm going to just list a few of them because Segal and Heller are so aligned in our commitment to our change and our efforts towards social capital as well as social justice. So our shared mission is to drive positive social change through research, education, and public engagement that inform policies and programs designed to address disparities in well-being and promote social inclusion in a sustainable way. So as each of you are out in your assignments, but also in your everyday role, you're looking for ways to make change, not in the immediate, and not just the grade you might be looking for from Mike and team or in your academic programs, but you're really dedicated to trying to create sustainable change. And therefore, to do so, committing to the guiding principles that we all hold dear. I'll just read a few of those, determined to have a real world impact in social policy management, but most importantly in community transformation and engagement. Focusing on universal human needs with a strong focus on those who are vulnerable, commitment to build an inclusive and diverse community, ability to be dynamic, innovative, adaptable, and definitely to achieve sustainability of your mission as an individual, as well as the mission of those you work with. And centering within all of that is mutual respect. I heard that as you were sharing your stories at lunch, how you were really connecting with, if not representing, the communities you were working with, showing that mutual respect for the different dimensions through which people contribute to the goals that you've laid out for yourself, as well as the organizations you work with that are also synonymous with the goals that the Segal program promotes. So within that is the dedication to a lifelong learning community that actively works through peers and alumni mentors, as well as your internship supervisors who are invaluable to the process, and promoting listening. I can't imagine any more important skill than listening with intentionality, mutual respect, and through that, building that sense of belonging and inclusion and social responsibility as part of your core competencies. So these are our shared values, strengthened through the Segal program. And because of those, honestly, I was humbled to just have lunch with you today, and I would love to continue the conversations, learning about the work you're doing and the change you're making. And I can't wait to hear your presentation. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Madison, for your words, for your commitment to the Segal program, for connecting us since we first said, I know we're all new here, but come to DC for our 10th anniversary and our retreat. And we just echo everything you said. For those of you who don't know us, the mission of the Eli J. and Phyllis N. Segal Citizen Leadership Program is to foster the next generation of citizen leaders. And we're a constantly expanding intergenerational network of citizen leaders working across sectors and across issue areas and giving each other lifelong support as we devise solutions to society's most intractable problems. So you can see the key program elements on the screen. You'll hear a lot today about the mission-driven internships, but I think our fellows will also mention other elements like mentorship, our curriculum, and our ongoing development. And one of the things that's at the heart of the program, you talked about Heller's key mission, key values, and in the Segal program, we have our core competencies. And I know some of our fellows are planning on referencing these today. We wanted to have them up on the screen for you to see, and also give you a bigger picture of who our Segal fellows are. 60% of our fellows join us through Brandeis or Heller as undergraduate students or MPP students. And we're thrilled to have MPP Director Mike Doonan here. And the other 40% of our fellows join us through our national service partners as AmeriCorps alumni and national service members from across the country. And that dual connection comes from Eli and Phyllis's connection to the national service world and to Brandeis and Heller. And so today you get to hear from our 2022 Brandeis and Heller Segal fellows. As Dean Madison said, they're a fabulous bunch. And it's been so inspiring to have you all as fellows in your first year, to get to know you through our leadership curriculum and our cohort, and to see the impact that you've had in your fellowship, in your internships, and the fellowship as a whole. And so I know that Dean Madison shared a lot of thanks. We're very grateful to the Segal family, to our Segal program founders, our donors, and our supporters. You can see in the photo here, our namesake and founder, Phyllis Segal, in the blue vest, and Maura Segal, our advisory board chair, who's with us online. Thank you for joining us online, Maura. And we're so thankful that John Segal is here with us in person today. Thank you, John. Thank you to the whole family for your vision, your passion, for thinking of this lifelong model as a way to honor Eli and Phyllis and this continuing legacy of mentorship and intergenerational leadership. We're also really grateful to our host sites from this year, many of whom are with us online today, so thank you. Some of our partners are also folks who made donations this year to the Segal program: ACLU of Massachusetts, Altarum, and Center for Coalfield Justice. Some of our internship partners otherwise are Mass Now and the NAACP Leadership Defense Fund's Thurgood Marshall Institute. And then we also had one Segal fellow this year who will talk about how she had her own individually planned and privately hosted internship with AIPAC. And you can see some very important names on the screen here. These are the supervisors who engaged and supported their fellows all summer. So thank you to them. Thank you to these organizations. And I also want to thank the IRE director for the part of the Institute for Economic and Racial Equity here at the Heller School, Lisa Lynch, who Dean Madison mentioned is here and a strong supporter of the Segal program. IRE team member Sylvia Stewart, who's also a Segal fellow, is helping with this event. And we're just grateful to everyone. I know some of you guys invited your family, and I saw you guys signed on online. So this is a friendly audience of fellows near and far, the larger Segal network, and folks who are interested in applying. And with that, Catherine, I'll turn it over to you. We'll hear briefly from each of our fellows about themselves and their internship. Then we'll have a little bit of a panel where they've planned some questions they want to answer. And our hope is to leave some time for Q&A at the end. so that we can engage with those of you who are here in person and with the over 20 folks that we have.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. My name is Catherine Gooding. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a second year MPP student in the Economic and Racial Equity concentration. I'm from Morgantown, West Virginia originally. My policy interests are really around rural community development, just transition and environmental justice, and newly, because of my internship this summer, also very interested in barriers to accessing federal funds for rural communities. So this summer I worked at the Center for Coalfield Justice. I have a little information on the screen here about them. They're an advocacy, education, and organizing organization based out of Washington, Pennsylvania. In their region, there is the largest producing underground coal mining complex in North America and more than 3,000 frac wells. And so what they do is really to organize the community to empower folks to advocate for themselves and their environment and their home around these issues that have really dominated the economy and the environment. And I have here on the screen a picture from one of the tours we took. This is the largest coal mining processing plant in the Western Hemisphere, and it overlooks this cemetery, which I think is just a perfect metaphor for what living in an extractive area is like. Okay, so what I was doing at CCJ this summer was primarily around federal funding. I was building an institutional knowledge base, particularly about the Justice 40 initiative, which I can talk more about in the quick Q&A if you're curious, and then some other recent federal funding packages. I had a lot of conversations with experts in the field, compiled a federal funding toolkit for water authorities who are looking for resources to pursue their projects. I also wrote blog posts, memos, and also hosted a public meeting for local officials who are pursuing funding. I have some pictures here. The top is myself and Mina, one of the other fellows at CCJ. We were tabling at the first ever Washington Pride, which was really exciting. And then at the bottom here, this is most of the team at our annual Ryerson Festival in July, which was really awesome also. So my key takeaway from this summer, there are many, but I think one of the biggest ones is that in frontline communities, climate change is so incredibly local. And when we talk about climate change, we think about it in big, big concepts, melting ice caps and greenhouse gases. But in frontline communities, it's about water quality and air quality. And it's about, is your house being undermined and going to be structurally, the integrity going to be damaged? So I think we need to have more of we need to consider these more local issues when we're thinking about this. And finally, because of the Segal program, I was able to expand my own vision of what my future looks like within the just transition movement and to see myself as a potential leader in this field.
It's always powerful to hear about your experience this summer. And Gabriella Lieberman.
Hello, my name is Gabriella and I am a senior at Brandeis graduating this semester. My policy interests lie in the national security, foreign policy realm, and on campus, I'm really involved with Vote Dice. I was the former president of the Brandeis Liberal Public Affairs Committee. I was on the Associate Justice, I was Associate Justice on the Judiciary and involved in student movement action. I'm studying politics with a minor in Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies. I thought I'd share a little bit about my background, which can give a little bit of an explanation of where I see myself moving forward in my internship this summer. I grew up in a very Jewish household where my heritage and my religion was proudly embraced, and on Friday nights, we would have everyone at our table celebrating our Jewish identity and talking about problems that face the world. One of which is anti-Semitism and white supremacy. And, my white supremacists almost tried to wipe out my family once, and I'm not going to let that happen again. So combating racially motivated domestic extremism is something that is incredibly important to me. Another issue that was always mentioned at my Shabbat table was Israel. And I grown up in a very Zionist household, and the importance of a strong and robust U.S.-Israel relationship as the foundation for a future peace process and the foundation for a secure and robust Jewish homeland, and is very important to me and something that I am working towards. And therefore, I've been very active on campus with AIPAC, and as my last semester before I graduate, I really wanted to have a capstone internship at AIPAC. And this summer I focused on campaign finance, and even though my interests lie in the policy realm, I think working in campaign finance is a really important lens to understanding how policy actually is formulated. Because you can see the different external impacts and influences that really shape how policy is made and what factors go into it. So though it wasn't necessarily policy focused, it did give me a good background into something that I would hopefully do in the future once I graduate. So primarily I was I was doing a lot of data analysis. I was helping the PAC wherever they needed and doing a lot of research on PAC contributions. And my biggest takeaway from this summer was mentorship. I found a lot of people who are really invested in my future and helped me through this very, interesting pathway once I graduate. And I'm really grateful for all the support that my coworkers and mentors gave me. And just because of the Segal program, I was able to find a community of people, both in DC during my internship and here at Brandeis, who are dedicated to public service and citizen leadership and who I can learn from continuously day in and day out.
Thanks so much, Gabriella, for all that you shared, and thank you, Vianny Rodriguez, for coming.
Hello, everybody. My name is Vianny Rodriguez. I am a second-year MPP ERA concentrator. My policy interests, I think, are pretty wide-ranging, but my focus is on civic engagement and voting rights. And I think it's kind of interesting that my background, I have a dual degree in marketing and psychology, which at first glance doesn't feel like it really connects to the things I'm learning into my internship, but really informs the way I view the world and approach my work. And prior to coming to Heller, I also served in the Peace Corps Philippines, which provided me with a very wide range of experiences and roles that I still reference and tap into today, and actually really helped with my internship experience as well. And my summer internship was at the ACLU of Massachusetts. Super grateful for that opportunity, where my main takeaway, sounds kind of cheesy, but community, however you define it, is strength. It was really encouraging and eye-opening to see that people, and be reminded that people do care and people will show up. I had the great opportunity to sit in on a lot of staff, partner, and community meetings. And it was mainly interesting because that work tends to be very invisible, but it's truly the wind that keeps the ship moving. In the same way that my cohort and the community I've been able to build and the folks I got to work with are also the wind that keeps me moving. And because of the Segal program, I have a greater appreciation for the leader and everybody, and I want to further learn how to identify and tap into that. Mainly, I got to work on the Know Your Share public education campaign. Though my interest is mostly in voter education, it was really interesting to dive into the criminal justice system in that sphere. And I mainly got to research and collect information on sheriffs, who they are, what they do, and why their role is so important, why any elected official's role is so important, why we should know more about it. For two reasons. One was so that Massachusetts voters would be more aware that sheriffs are elected officials at 6-year terms, and they hold quite a bit of power. And I believe the last election season, 680,000 blank ballots for sheriffs, which shows that not a lot of folks really knew who they were or bothered to vote for them. And second of all, voters deserve the opportunity to make more informed decisions, especially this election season, because they're the only ones that can truly hold sheriffs accountable. That's it.
Thank you so much, Vianny. Vianny's site visit this summer was the only one I got to do in person with her supervisor, Laura Roslow, and Whitney Taylor from the ACLU of Massachusetts. And what you told me throughout the summer when you talked about them was in my own head when I was voting in the primary and the care stuff. So thank you. And Jolecia Saunderson, we're still talking.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jolecia Saunderson. I'm a current junior at Brandeis. I'm studying politics and African American studies. On campus, I'm involved in the Women of Color Alliance, Roses in Concrete, and I'm in the process of starting my own club, the Multicultural Hair Art and Empowerment Club. Like basically a club that explores the Crown Act and how diverse hairstyles and the workplace and classroom should be celebrated rather than discriminated against. I feel like this is really important to me, even like today, me wearing blue ends, like it's something that I wanted to experiment because I feel like it's so important to show up as your authentic self rather than to be conformed to something that you're not. I'm interested in law, educational justice, social policy, and art. I feel like spoken word and poetry is something that I lived through the lens through, and I really love that in anything that I go through and walk through. I interned at the NAACP Legal Defense Educational Fund, and we helped to create a public housing lab, which was really nice. I met amazing people and I learned so much. My main takeaway as a public housing resident was public housing plans and seeing the impacts of that and how it impacts residents when it comes to evictions and the way that they're treated. Because of the Segal program, I feel like I built community with Susie, my Segal buddy Stephanie, because she always gives me the realty on what it's like to be a Black woman in law. I feel like she's somebody who I can always go to, and she really has been my rock throughout all of this. And I feel like my Segal core and just learning to be a young leader and what that looks like is really important to me. And I feel like I've gotten that from this experience. When it comes to my work at the NAACP Legal Defense Educational Fund, I looked at police misconduct cases, which was really interesting because I was able to look around globally and see like what cases were being solved, what cases weren't being looked at. And I feel like holding police accountable was really important to me because I saw in a lot of the cases that I feel like something that American law does a lot is they just give a lot of settlements and they just like to cover things up. When we should really be looking at the families who are impacted by those police misconduct cases and looking to help them and the impacts that they're going through because their children are being killed consistently. And I feel like when we don't take that accountability and we don't hold those people accountable, it just continues this cycle and perpetuates that oppression. So being able to look back on these families and make sure they're okay and to make sure that we're going to these communities and talking to these members are really important. I feel like another thing that I looked at once again was public housing lab. And as an artist myself, I was like tasked with finding a way to connect art and law. So I decided to create a public housing complex, and inside it we put policies and implementations that we would like to see in public housing, therefore residents are taken care of, therefore janitors are taken care of, and they're knowing what to do inside of public housing to better those environments for those living there. I feel like I also connected with lawyers and other students. It was really cool to like, and magical to walk inside of the atmosphere and just to see all the things that were happening and to connect with those lawyers and to learn something new. I also learned about police surveillance in schools. This was a project that I did last semester too. And I feel like similar to the way I was talking about the way that hair is discriminated against in classrooms, I feel like other things are based on the way you're dressed, based on the way you talk and walk. And by being able to see how students were impacted by over policing and the ways that teachers and educators, as well as principals and deans, really do have responsibility in changing the way that students look at education when they're walking in, as well as when they're walking out, was something that I learned, and it was amazing. That's my work, yeah.
Congratulations, Shania Thomas.
So hello everyone, I'm Shania Thomas. I'm also a second year MPP candidate with a concentration in health policy and a focus on long-term care delivery. I'm originally from New Jersey by way of New York. I've spent equal amounts of time in both of those places. And I'm also a Brandeis alum in the class of 2021. And I got my BAs in politics and health policy. This summer I worked with Altarum in their delivery system transformation team. And Altarum is a nonprofit organization that works with federal and state health agencies and foundations to improve health outcomes for Medicare and Medicaid beneficiaries. And that's part of the work that I did this summer. And because of the Segal program, I learned how to lean into my strengths to overcome my weaknesses, and particularly bringing in expertise from all different areas and all different backgrounds to build better solutions. So my work this summer sort of had three prongs, and the most prominent one was my work with a home and community-based service agency that worked with home health aides in New York and working on their retention and recruitment for that particular agency, with work focusing on like the issues of workforce development in this particular area. And we did this through survey development and focus group and key informant interviewing. And I'm actually still shadowing that project now since it's still currently in the works. And then I also did literature research on home health value-based payment, since there was a recent CMS final ruling on that. And so I did some memo writing regarding that. And then we also generally at Altarum have been having conversations about future planning and prioritizing certain goals for future project work. They recently had some transition in leadership, and it's really exciting. It's a really great opportunity to think about how we can expand, or the company can expand like its impact, and particularly how times of transition are times to think big and think about how to make solutions that are more equitable, that focus on communities that are truly impacted by health inequalities and health-related social needs, unmet health-related social needs. But that was a major focus of my work also. And so I did that by creating workflows for their culture change projects specifically.
Thanks so much, Shania. It's wonderful that you've been able to stay connected in the fall, and Hannah, I know you've stayed connected with your organization as well. So last but not least, Hannah Wilcove.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Wilcove. I use she and they pronouns. I am also a second-year NPP student concentrating in women, gender, and sexuality. My policy interests are primarily in the field of reproductive justice, which I view in feminist tradition as a broad framework to look at multiple interconnected issues. It's not just about abortion rights. So my summer internship was at MassNow, which is the Massachusetts chapter of the National Organization for Women. A little bit of background about me. I graduated from UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County in 2019 with a bachelor's degree in gender and women's studies and a minor in sociology. Prior to coming to Heller, I worked on political campaigns. I'm also from the DC metro area, so I'm very used to politics and campaigning. And I worked on campaigns primarily in Virginia that ranged from local to federal elections. And because of the Segal program, I was able to build a relationship with a mentor who continues to support me today. So my work at MassNow encompassed a little bit of everything. Primarily, I tracked the status of bills on the legislative agenda and really focused on the legislative side of things. So this involved making a lot of spreadsheets, spending a lot of time on the Massachusetts General Assembly's website, really following the nearly 40 bills that were on the legislative agenda. And they spanned across 6 issue areas, which are listed here. They are racial justice, economic equity, reproductive justice, LGBTQ rights, gender-based violence, and constitutional equity. So a lot of these endorsed bills may not at first glance seem to be about women's advancement and empowerment, but all of them have to do with gender parity and creating a feminist democracy. So as part of this, I also met with legislators, stakeholders, coalition partners, to really track the status of these bills and also to learn about the advocacy and lobbying efforts that were being made, that were made to push these bills forward and really make real change in the state of Massachusetts. We also did a lot of event planning and organization, largely around the I Am bill, which is MassNow's priority bill this session, which is to increase access to menstrual products and provide disposable menstrual products for free in all schools, homeless shelters, and correctional facilities across the state. So I also wrote a lot of memos, including an op-ed, a final report, and submitted a public records request and miraculously got a response. And I am continuing to work on a project about providing free menstrual products in Fall River through the end of this month. And my biggest takeaway is really that change, especially policy change and legislative change, takes a lot of time and a lot of consistent, dedicated effort from a large group of committed people.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you to each of you for sharing not only about your internships, but also who you are and how that ties into the leaders that you are now and you'll continue to be. You heard a lot of reference to the HOSA partners and their supervisors, and I think you'll hear that more in our panel questions. So over the last couple of weeks since we've gotten back, fellows chose which questions they wanted to ask themselves. And after we hear from them on these, we'll get to hear from you. But first, we'll talk through and hear from each fellow in order down the row of what new perspectives the Segal Summer Internship offered you as a citizen leader.
So I think one of the biggest things I was really going back and forth about, I think it's my primary takeaway when I was making my slides. I think one of the biggest things that I learned this summer was about what it is like to organize and do political work in a place where the prevailing politics might not align with your own. And, you know, so I think we were doing a lot of sort of more progressive environmental justice work in a very conservative, very rural community. And, you know, I think the model that we used that was emphasized was dignity first. With that, people can tell when you don't respect them, people can tell when you think that they're voting against their own interests. And so if you come to people with an assumption that they have their own personal intrinsic dignity and that they're doing the best that they can for themselves and their families with what they have, that is how relationships can be built and how change can be made, even in places that, you know, might otherwise be written off. So I thought that was really critical. And I was telling Dean Madison earlier today about something that stuck with me, a conversation I had with one of my coworkers this summer, where she was putting out, I think it was air quality monitors, and talked to this gentleman who was sort of reserved about the whole thing and wasn't sure. And he said, you know, I'm for coal mining and I'm for fracking, and I don't know if you want to give me this air quality monitor. And she said, you know, we don't have to have the same politics for me to believe that you deserve clean air. Right. And so I think that was such a key shift for me, is that like, we can come from different places, but if we start with dignity and we start with relationship building, then we can do really incredible things.
Yeah, I think going off of that, I mean, I think something I learned this summer is no matter the fact that we come from different backgrounds and have whole different politics, we agree on one issue, we can work together. AIPAC is a bipartisan organization, and its employees are Republicans, they're Democrats, they're Libertarians, they're Independents. And the diversity of their employees was so beautiful to see, because they disagree on a lot of things, but they can come together and singularly work on the same shared mission, which I think is really beautiful. And I think it takes me to my second point of what I learned this summer, is that bipartisanship is so important. AIPAC, again, is a bipartisan organization. All the legislation that they support is on a bipartisan basis, and all the PAC contributions that they give is also on a bipartisan basis. And you, from having conversations with people who worked with AIPAC for years, bipartisanship is something that's kind of becoming more scarce year after year, and it's affecting the effectiveness of Congress as an institution and like the body of our nation. And it's a really sad reality that we're facing, and something that we really need to work on to ensure that more things remain bipartisan, and that lawmakers from across the aisle can continue to work on issues together, because that's the only thing that will actually have the ability to have things passed for Congress.
Yeah, kind of, I guess, to those points also, just I think of a newfound appreciation for data. And an interesting finding that came up this summer was that there was no standard budgetary formula and no standardized data collection for any of the sheriff's offices. And as I'm sure we all know, we cannot manage what we do not measure. And so, and the same is true for communities. I feel like often we treat them like, or we are seen as monoliths and single stories, and not as the nuanced, complicated folks that make up those communities. And I think with better data collection that really reflects those nuances, we could actually start working towards sustainable solutions instead of just dwelling on the problems, as well as actually holding people and systems accountable, because if we don't know what we're tackling, then how are we going to actually ever get to a solution?
Going off of that amazing point, I feel like I learned the power of asking for help as well as working inside of a team. it really is true that the people that you meet in this life sometimes can shape the way that you view the world. And I feel like the people that I've connected with over the summer, I can't wait for each of our futures and the things that we'll do. I feel like something that I really learned was the power through public housing of connecting with actual activists in the flesh, because I feel like it's one thing to do research and to look at people as just numbers and data, but you have to go beyond that. And I feel like through connecting with these people, I was able to get that human interaction, to get those actual conversations, because they are people and they are humans at the end of the day. They're not just data points. And I feel like that allowed me to explore and change the world in a way that impacted me as a young leader. So me doing that work and just being able to connect and learn from so many people was very impactful.
For me, working in a nonprofit organization that's solely focused on finding solutions and creating recommendations. I had an opportunity to learn more about how to approach problem solving. Being in this environment, being in Brandeis for so long, you come across so many different people that are interested in so many different intersecting issue areas that are all critical for understanding the problems that I'm trying to find solutions for and trying to overcome. But it can also be really overwhelming and make it feel like there are no solutions. Everything is always going to be horrible. But being at Altarum, it really helped me focus my thoughts and manage my expectations. And I learned that I just need to, what we're doing is we're going to research this one thing, we're going to understand this one element of this problem. And that together with all of the people that I'm around, and all of the other people doing research and finding new ways to measure, we're going to come together and we'll find solutions.
Yeah, so something that we did early on in the Segal program was really examine all of our strengths according to the Clifton Strengths Finder assessment. And for me, most of my strengths are very much in thinking big and visionary ideas, in envisioning the kind of changes that we want to see and that I want to see. And less so in, you know, the actual follow through and the smaller steps that it takes to get there. Unlike some of my other cohort members, which is why we all make a good team. But for me, really seeing firsthand with, you know, like close to 40 bills on MassNow's legislative agenda, like I said, seeing how those bills were prioritized, what was prioritized, and the consistent long-term work that it takes to actually get to this kind of change was really empowering, because I know that the people at MassNow, whether they are Sasha, the one paid staff member, or all of the volunteers on their board or all the members, have the same visionary goals that I do and want to get there, and that these people have been working for years, if not decades, at achieving these goals. And understanding that it takes time, it takes pragmatism as well as passion is really important. And to see all of that play out, I think made me a better thinker and a better problem solver.
Thanks so much to each of you. There's so many new perspectives that you're bringing with you now and carrying forward. So you're getting to see and hear from our 6 newest fellows. But as we said, this is a lifelong program. There are 148 fellows across the country. We also have a Segal network of 600 plus founders and partners. And so we wanted you guys to share a little bit about the most useful ways that you leverage the Segal network and Segal program resources over the past year. I know some of you joining us today are interested in applying, so this may be interesting to you as well. So we'll hear from Jolecia, Shania, Gabriella, and Kat.
I utilize the Segal network because I utilize my Segal buddy Stephanie, and I also utilize Susie. It helped me to discover my passions and found out more about myself as an inspiring lawyer. I feel like my Segal buddy, my Segal cohort was something that I utilized because we're able to look at our leadership strengths and we were becoming as young leaders. And I feel like I used my buddy Stephanie because I was able to talk with her about her time at Brandeis compared to my time at Brandeis now. And that was really interesting because she's another woman of color. To kind of compare our experiences and to see like where we're going and just the field overall was something that was very useful to me. And I learned a lot through each of that.
I also have to commend Susie for all of the help and that encouragement that she's been. The summer was kind of hard for me. I'm having some illness in my family and it impacted my work, and Susie was there for all of that, and I really appreciate her for that, as well as my fellows. But speaking more generally about the program, I really appreciated the research that the core competencies have been to me. Being able to carry that into literally everything that I do, to better understand myself as a citizen leader and the world around me and the society that we live in, helps inform my work. And particularly like our session on evaluation as a social justice tool was really helpful, particularly this summer, since most of Altarum's work is evaluation. So I've really appreciated that.
There's a lot of wonderful Segal fellows who live in the DC area, and I was really fortunate enough to connect with them and build relationships with them throughout my time interning in DC. And it was really just great to hear their experience in the fellowship, but also their insight onto like public policy and the legislative process, and just have someone there as like a shoulder to cry on it. I don't know, like a peer, a friend. And that was really great, especially because moving to a new city, it can be a little bit daunting sometimes. But also the Segal Fellowship has this thing called Leadership Development Funds, which basically is $280 per fiscal year for fellows to use towards professional development. And I started a podcast with a friend of mine at Brandeis called Coffee Break Campaigning, which basically is demystify the campaign process to make it more approachable for young individuals. And I was able to use the LDF grant to hire an editor. So our sound can actually be, somewhat good. I don't know anything about technology. I know my strengths and my weaknesses. And also to buy a metro card for the summer. So I could, meet my fellow Segal fellows in DC for coffee. And that was really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think echoing what everyone has said, I think the cohort has just been such a really strong and valuable asset, getting to know all these wonderful people and understanding your interests and different leadership styles has been so valuable. I also, really appreciated the assistance that Susie provided in securing an internship. I know hearing from my classmates who were not in the fellowship, that was a really stressful experience, but Susie could not have made the process any easier, and really opened some doors for me to pursue something at CCJ that I don't think would have been possible otherwise. Not at all questioning like, oh, she wants to go back to Appalachia, like, okay, never questioning that. And so I think that the internship process was so incredibly valuable, and just the whole cohort experience has been wonderful.
Well, it is a great experience you guys have had leaning on and learning with each other in the cohort, and thank you for your kind words about the program and myself as well. So we're conscious of what year and what month it is. We know there's midterm elections coming up, and for several of our fellows, the upcoming election and a larger political context of this year influence their experiences, their thinking, and their action for the fellow this summer and fall. So we'll hear from Hannah, Vianny, and Gabriella about that.
Of course, Mike stepped out right before his question. I didn't understand him. But for me, less so about the election and more the larger political context. So as we know, the end of June is when the Supreme Court issued the Dobbs decision overturning Roe versus Wade. And on a personal level, as someone who has been doing this work and as someone who is directly impacted by access to reproductive medical care, that obviously was, incredibly emotional. And we also have seen how within the larger political system, this has just really caused a major shift. There are suddenly a lot more people who are involved, who want to be involved, who want to help, who want to do this work. And on the one hand, it's great that there are so many more people who are motivated by an attack on reproductive rights, that people recognize that as something that is wrong and that needs to be rectified. On the other hand, where have you been? Really, something valuable from this summer has been recognizing the work that Mass Now does and does not do in this field. Yes, one of our issue areas on our legislative agenda is reproductive justice, and it's incredibly important. but it is not just about abortion access. And there are people, specifically women of color, women in suppressed low-income communities, women in gerrymandered areas, women, especially in the South, who have been doing this work for decades, who have been doing this work for so much longer. And it was really interesting for me to see both how we engage in this work and how we defer to the people who have been leading this fight and leading this movement for so much longer, the people with the most experience in this work and what they are doing, because this took a long time to get to this point. It's going to take a long time to get out of it. And we are not going to get out of it by everybody suddenly waking up because of this decision, deciding to get involved now and thinking that they have all the answers and that they know best. It is really important to defer to the people who have been doing this work, as I've said, recognize their experience and their leadership and support them in the ways that they recognize their agency to ask for what they need and give them what they need and help them that way.
That was super fun. Oh, I've just been processing, sorry. Yeah, to that point, I think for me, my motto is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Now it's starting to feel more like a lifestyle than anything. But I think we need to start learning how to have tough conversations and not automatically see it as being divisive. And disagreeing with folks not being an inherently bad thing. I think especially with this election, it was really cool to go through candidates and just be like, what do you actually stand for? Challenge them, question them. Something that kept popping up actually, not just this summer, but in general, is folks thinking that voting for their party is enough, or voting for, just voting along certain lines, I guess. But I think we need to start really challenging those leaders and holding them accountable, because just because they're a Democrat doesn't make them great or mean that they have great platform. I think politics should be more accessible. It's not really fun to go into all of that or really easy to read or understand. Should be more innovative and I think more collaborative. Really go into these communities and understand what it is that they want, and have conversations and dialogue that don't always happen or really are easy to make. I don't know about y'all, but town hall meetings are really hard. And Zoom made it more accessible, but there's still a lot of improvement on that end for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing what you guys are saying. I was very privileged from like a young age to be encouraged to join the political process, and therefore I worked on numerous campaigns and I've had a lot of experience. And I find that when I talk to my peers, it's not always the case. They find politics to be really daunting. They find campaigns to be really overbearing. They don't know where to begin. What are the entry points? How can you get involved? So I think for this campaign cycle, beyond working in campaign finance this summer, I really tried to do everything I can to make the process itself more accessible to young individuals, specifically people in college. So I launched this podcast, which each episode we tackle one area of campaign infrastructure with people who have worked in campaigns and really try to bring it down to make it more biteable and digestible. I am very involved with Vote Dice on Campus, which is a nonpartisan coalition to increase civic engagement at Brandeis. And on October 7th, we're having a giant event in which people can register to vote, send their absentee ballots, and get information about Massachusetts voting, which is very exciting. And then lastly, I am volunteering with a campaign in Virginia and helping students get involved there to make sure that they have access to phone banking and connecting with other campaigns that they may be interested in working for.
Well, thank you, and it's great to hear what the six of you are up to, and across our Segal fellows across the country. There are so many fellows that are involved in campaigns and elections, including some fellows who are running for office. State rep in New Hampshire, Demond Ford, and city councilor in Rhode Island, Justin Royas. And so Segal Fellows and Segal Network members and, you know, our namesake, Segal Fellow Segal, have been so involved in that connection to the importance of this. So we may still have time for one question at the end, but we did ask the fellows the tough task of in 60 seconds or less, sharing a little bit about what keeps you going through tough and emotionally exhausting work. And what advice would you offer to others in similar fields? And we know this, you've gotten a lot of support from your mentors throughout the summer, and happy to hear from you on this.
I think number one, I think that the importance of the way that the organization is run cannot be understated. So Veronica, who was my supervisor, was our executive director, ran the organization in a way that was, you know, employee health first. And I think that is so critical. So I don't know if anyone from CCJ is on the Zoom, but shout out to Veronica. Yeah, I think that's number one. But I think also for me, you know, I had different things that were ways I engaged with the community and with my friends. And one of the things that I really did this summer a lot of was that I have a national or state park about 20-minute drive from home. And I had this goal to like go find the rhododendrons in peak bloom. And so every week I would like take a book or take a journal and I'd go out to Cooper's Rock and I'd like go look for the rhododendrons and then sit and read or write or whatever. And that became such a critical self-care activity for me. You know, to be in a space that is so renewing for me and do that. So I recommend going out, being in nature, and also working in a place that is focused on your well-being.
Definitely my friends and my family have helped me through times in which the work is kind of tough or it's frustrating or through bits of imposter syndrome or just burnout in general being a student. Really having people who are there to support you and to uplift you and encourage you, I think is really important. And it's something that I really has been very like helpful to me throughout this journey. Advice I'd have to others wanting to join. Something that my parents always tell me from when I was a kid is that there's two types of people. People who believe in the I can'ts and people who believe in I can. And I don't put yourself in the I can't. Always tell yourself that things are possible because if you work towards it, they are possible. And I think that's been my motto throughout my entire life. And it's definitely something that I would advise other people, especially students who can really struggle with imposter syndrome and not necessarily knowing where the next steps are.
For me, I think it was super important to establish a why and hold on to it. It was something that we got drilled into us in Peace Corps because things got really, really tough. And just remembering why I'm doing this, why it's important, really helped me stick through it. And my why is just to be happy. Just simple happiness, not toxic positivity, but just being happy. And during my internship, I had a weekly one-on-one with my supervisor, Lauda, and those were little bits of happiness where it wasn't always talk about work, but just checking in on life, talking about just normal things, everyday things when things just felt like the world was on fire and things were out of control. It was really nice to have those little bits of normalcy and remember I'm a normal person with my own interests and just things that make me happy. Going back to writing, I don't remember the last time I wrote, but using the summer to really go back to that, reading a book that's not a 75-page article for class was really, really refreshing too. And so just going back to my why I do it all. Just I think everybody deserves a little bit of happiness. So
That's such an amazing point. I feel like for me, something that's really kept me going in rough times has been TikTok. Like just being able to be and see a funny video every now and then. As well as I mentioned, like how I love words and spoken word and poetry. I feel like poetry has really allowed me to connect with other people and allowed me to grow as a person and to learn more about myself. I would say another thing similar to what Vianny just said about her why. I feel like my why is something that really allows me to keep going, and that intrinsic motivation is really important. I was talking about this yesterday with one of my seatmates, and I was talking about the tradition of Segal. I feel it's an African tradition, but it's something that allows me to learn because it's taking the knowledge that I've learned as a person and making sure to spread that to others. And I feel like having that and being able to continue to spread that knowledge is really important to me as a person. So I try to live and to embody my life, to look at those who've come before me, just to learn what I'm learning and to make sure to pass that on to others. And I feel like that's what's been getting me through the tough times, because I'm like, my life and my story is going to be a testimony to others, and I have to make sure that testimony is something powerful and something they can look towards.
Yeah, I think I echo what others have said, particularly what Catherine mentioned about being in an organization that fosters your personal growth and that works to protect one another from sort of the strain that is doing this kind of work. But also for me, it's just remembering that I'm not doing this alone, and that so many of us are working to do this work, and you know, remembering that there's a legacy of people who have been doing this work, whether it be us that are here currently or those before us who have been Segal fellows, and just generally who have subscribed to making social justice happen in the real world around us. So just remembering that and remembering that I'm working for the future who are also going to be doing this work really helps strengthen my resolve.
Yeah, so two big things of this. The first is, as has been mentioned, having people that you can lean on who understand just how draining this work is, and allowing yourself to be human. And alongside that, knowing when to take a break and when to ask for help. I mentioned that we had several events to promote menstrual equity in the IAM bill. One of them was a rally in late May. And that day after the rally had ended was when the news broke of the Uvalde massacre. And obviously that was something that was heartbreaking for everyone. And the next day I just texted Sasha and was like, I can't, I need to day off. I just need to be human and to process this immense tragedy. And I was very fortunate to have a supervisor who's completely understanding, who took no issue with that, who said, that is the correct choice, do that, like, be human, and recognizing that. The other thing is that I have been very open about my struggles with mental health and mental illness. And in addition to, you know, access to antidepressants and a therapist, the other thing that has been very good, especially when those struggles really relate to systemic policy issues, is knowing when to do the work. It's why I got involved with campaigns after college in the first place, and that in a lot of ways, the only way out is through. And knowing that you are fighting to make the world better and for yourself and for the people you love and care about who sustain you, is something that is in itself empowering and, you know, really sustainable if you do it right.
Thank you all so much for the depth of what you shared. It's so powerful to hear from each of you at all levels of the people and the leaders that you are. We're so grateful to have you as lifelong fellows. We're grateful to everyone who's joined us online, to everyone who's joined us in the room, and to all of the fellows, the founders, the partners, the donors, the supporters who've gotten us to this place where this year we'll be celebrating both our 15th anniversary of the program as well as the selection of our 150th member. And I know some folks, I know Catherine has a commitment currently starting at 1:30, and a few folks may have to leave now. So thank you for joining us online and in person. And we'll also keep those who can stay here for 5 minutes to just see if there's some Q&A or some other thoughts that people want to share. So thank you again and congratulations. And we'll take questions. I will also say before folks go, please apply to become a Segal Fellow if you're a sophomore, junior, or MPP student or a national service alum. And thank you, Catherine. So I don't know, John, if there was anything you wanted to share that before you.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, gosh, so much wisdom. Thank you so much for sharing it all. I love some of the sayings that I'm hearing. I love what Vianny says about getting comfortable, feeling uncomfortable. I think that's something that even at age 53, I'm still working on, and I know that that's super important. I was loving what Catherine was talking about, and Gabriella too, about the importance of bipartisanship. I was particularly taken, and I did want to ask Catherine a question, but she's gone now, about dignity first and how that conversation went. Because I've been there, I think we've all been there, where the person started by saying our politics are just so different. But I loved how Catherine brought it home to the individual personal, we don't have to have the same politics to have the same desire for clean air or clean water, or for your family to be safe. Now that we have this big election coming up, we have so many big elections coming up, but we have one coming up in a couple of months. I'm not really looking for, hopeful Pollyannish comments. I really want to sort of understand the reality of it. Do you feel through your experiences that our quest for bipartisanship, for being able to reach across the aisle, is more real than perhaps when you started? And if not, I want to hear that too, but I'm so curious through the experiences, and this is really a question for multiple people here, if anyone wants to share.
You're gonna take the affirmative, I can do the dissent. Never.
If you want to start.
I mean, to me, no, and I am definitely staunchly partisan from my work in campaigns. I'm obviously coming at this with a particular point of view, and I'm also just a very stubborn person. But for me, there are certain, and I agree in the sense of that it is important to be able to put partisan differences aside when you have key issues that you want to make progress on. And I have seen examples of that on federal level and also on state and local level. For me, in my work as in the field of reproductive justice, when there is one party that is essentially, with the exception of maybe a handful of members, and I really only mean like single digits, that is so fundamentally opposed to not just abortion access, but also contraception, marriage equality, and just a core tenet of reproductive justice. One is bodily autonomy, and the other is having the conditions in which to freely choose whether or not to start a family and how, and to be able to raise a family safely. And I think that when you have a party in the Republican Party that is so fundamentally opposed to that, that is really demonstrated by the extremism of this right-wing court that has implemented the Dobbs ruling that overturned Roe, it is incredibly difficult for me to see how a pathway to reaching across the aisle, to working across the aisle on a bipartisan level to actually implement what are really important fundamental human rights and bodily autonomy priorities.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a population, there is a demographic of people who, are yearning for this, like, less partisanship and more bipartisanship. I mean, if you look at the way that the Senate is formulated, you need more than 50 votes to get anything passed. So bipartisanship is a staple of whatever of the institutions that we have, and it's something that we need in order to get things done. I think there's a couple obstacles to actually getting us back on the road, back on track to bipartisanship as we knew it. I think bipartisanship now is kind of working together on more like micro, non-news buzzy pieces of legislation. But I think in order to get back to this place in which we can actually have conversations and have members of Congress from different parties actually be on a panel together and be in the same room, we need to stop listening to the loud voices in each party and go back to, the basics and apply some sort of empathy and some sort of understanding towards the other side. Really ask where they're coming from and why the decisions that they're making. I'm a Democrat. I'm partisan. And there are some things that I will bend on. And there are some things that I won't work on with the other party because they are fundamentally opposed to something that I stand for. However, that doesn't mean that we can't work together on things that we have in common. And sometimes compromise is hard, but I think there is, I think there are people, and I think people are ready for, a return to a place in which we can have conversations and dialogues about things that we agree on.
Thank you. I'll just quickly add, I thought Catherine's story gave me hope. It's just one little story, but there was a ray of hope in that, so thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think you all are a ray of hope. The organizations you partnered with this summer are a ray of hope. The Segal Fellows and the Segal Partners and everyone in this room and online. We have strong rays of hope coming from each of you. So thank you and congratulations to our fellows. Thank you to all of you who are joining us and who support us. And for those of us who can stick around for a bit, we will do that. But otherwise, just thank you, congratulations.